Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast and get CME for this episode by clicking on the CME link in the show notes. Today, we welcome back Barbara Olson. She's a nurse and chief clinical officer of the Just Culture Company. Today's KevinMD article is titled A Shop Teacher's Daughter on Transforming Patient Safety. Barbara, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me today, Kevin. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Now, for those who didn't listen to our first episode together, I think it was a year and a half ago, just briefly remind our viewers your story and journey.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. When you and I spoke about a year and a half ago, we were talking about a nurse who was being sentenced in the criminal courts for an on-the-job medication error. And my background is, well, actually, if you looked at my social media feeds, it'll tell you I'm a nurse with an engineer's mind. So it's not a bad elevator speech to understand who I am and how I look at the world. About 15 years ago, I turned my career, though, to patient safety, which is the science of preventing people from being harmed as a result of care that is intended to help them. And I've been privileged to serve on the Executive Oversight Committee for the Certification Board for Professionals in Patient Safety, and was the member of a working group that developed the first certification exam for professionals in this discipline. And I'm telling you these things, and I could tell you more about personal experiences, supporting teams, driving measurable improvements, and receiving national awards, only because it's important to understand I bring deep subject matter expertise. I really have been deeply engaged in this work over the past 2 decades and really relish the opportunity to talk more about where we are and perhaps why we are where we are. So thanks for mentioning that I work at the Just Culture Company and that my current focus is really around helping organizations adopt systems of fair accountability to say, what do you recognize? What do you reward? What do you tolerate? And what do you punish in the workplace? And how does that contribute to the outcomes that we're getting? Because we're going to talk about the article I wrote that's called A Shop Teacher's Daughter on Transforming Patient Safety, I will tell you, in addition to my professional credentials, that I grew up in a house where people routinely said things like measure twice, cut once, and fail to plan, plan to fail. And it turns out, Kevin, that these things actually have a lot to do with how well we're doing and what we need to do more. The ultimate question is, do we have a good plan to improve the safety of patients, or are we still executing against a plan that is not sufficient?
All right, so let's talk about that article that you wrote on KevinMD, A Shop Teacher's Daughter on Transforming Patient Safety. How did your article come together?
So the impetus for the article was a report that was published in early September of this year called Transforming Patient Safety, and it came from the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. The first reports that told us that patients were not safe were published over 20 years ago. I read them all, and when this one came out, I read it too. It wasn't a surprise to those of us in the patient safety community, and frankly, to patients, all stakeholders, that there is dialogue around this. Right now, in this decade, we can assume that approximately a quarter of Medicare beneficiaries who have to be hospitalized will experience an adverse event, and that upwards of 250,000 people in the US each year die as a result of a medical error. It remains a serious problem. So when we think about, like, we've been at this for 2 decades, how are we doing? We know the answer is not what we would have expected it to have. The first thing that really impressed me about the new report is who it came from. The President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology is a 28-member group of national thought leaders who represent science, technology, and marketplace innovation. And their goal is to optimize the well-being of the populace. It seems to me that our first generation improvement work was informed by plans that were traced to the original IOM reports. These came from what I would call, some of my peers, some of my mentors, some people I admire, but overall, I would tell you they're dedicated, educated, positively motivated people. They're healers and academics, and they wisely invited others to the table. But I will say, I think it has been largely a physician heal thyself approach. There have been many economic carrots and a large number of economic sticks that went along with those plans in order to drive change. So, kind of maybe this early work was important, necessary, foundational, but I don't think you can argue, and I know my dad would not say, you got what you wanted as a result of that. So when you think about, all of the thousands of ways in healthcare that things both go right and go wrong, it is important to me to see that this report is coming from outside of healthcare, that it is respectful of healthcare knowledge and professionalism, but that it is saying in order to fix this, we need to bring everyone to the table. So that's really the first thing that I loved when I saw that report. The second thing that I really liked was that that healthcare workforce is included. We are including both patient safety and the safety and well-being of the people who care for the patient. I think that's really wise, all right? And relative to that kind of all-in holistic approach, I liked that there is a clear recognition of the need to partner with patients, not to satisfy patients or engage patients, but to truly come at this in a way that fully includes patients. The other piece of that inclusive nature that I thought was noteworthy is that the report clearly calls out disparities and recognizes that there are members of patient populations who have experienced harm at disproportionate rates, and that their engagement, their participation, seeing the world through different lenses is really important. And if I was going to flip back and put on my shop teacher's daughter hat, I'd say I think the original plan, Kevin, was a rising tide will lift all boats. And when you look at the data now, that was not a good plan. we have left many pockets untouched. So I think there's an opportunity that is reflected in the recommendations from this report that will help us get to a better place. And the third thing that I would call out that I love seeing in the report is the recognition that workplace justice, that what you recognize, reward, tolerate, and punish will inform what happens in the workplace. I'd also say, because I have been in the just culture space now for many years, that it can be a confusing term. Sometimes it's tossed around kind of like Kleenex, Windex, and we all have this reasonable understanding of what's in that bottle or what's in that box. But really, just culture is not like that. If an organization is going to benefit from having a workplace culture that performs in a certain way, it's really important to say, what does that look like specifically? And just culture is really about shared accountability. People are judged for the quality of their choices, not the luck of the outcome. And organizations are accountable for the systems that people use to deliver care. Functional models of workplace justice, what is just intrinsic to the just culture model, is recognition of human fallibility. I think our first generation of work helped a great deal. 25 years ago, it was really hard to say a smart physician or a caring nurse could err. That has been addressed and is some tamped down. The key, though, is to recognize, what do you do when you have that knowledge? And it is only going to result in something good if the fact of our fallibility is countered by systems that can reasonably anticipate both human error and what I would say in a very unscientific way could represent a sketchy choice. Right? Some choices are made because they're the best a person can do at the time, and sometimes they're not an ideal choice, but they actually represent a choice. So our systems of workplace justice have to deal with the fact that people of free will make choices that may or may not align. And we have to have systems that are able to deal with that can reliably produce the desired outcome, despite the fact that those things are happening all the time. The other thing I would tell you, about what I saw in that report, and that's important to recognize at scale, is that organizations, like who designs these systems, you can look and say, wow, it is really important for General Hospital to have good systems of care. But General Hospital does not have unlimited resources. We have to also look to say, how well are EHRs designed? How well are medical devices designed? How well are pharmaceuticals designed to help people do the right things and not step in the wrong hole? So this whole notion that this is all in is really important to me, and I think is really a differentiator as we're looking at what should come from this next call to action.
Now, tell me, how far are we to your ideal world of just culture? And if we're not quite there yet, tell us some of the immediate steps that hospitals and the medical institution should take in order to get us there.
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that just culture as a system of workplace justice is not one tool in a high reliability toolkit that you pull out when you're going to judge conduct in the aftermath of a bad event. For many people in healthcare, Kevin, it came to us that way. That's how we came to know, oh, there is such a thing. And for many people, this resonated. But just culture is really about what you choose to recognize, reward, tolerate, and punish all day, every day, on the days that you don't think anything has been even close to jumping the tracks, to the days when it seems like everything lined up and the whole thing fell off the rails. Because the difference between a catastrophic event and business as usual lives in what is business as usual. And as organizations strive to align their workplace accountability systems, it's really important to see this as not something that's in the patient safety toolkit. This is about how we respond to human conduct, patient safety, worker safety. We're talking about that today. That's really my life. But I will also tell you, I've mentioned already to you, things like, are we equitable? Are we fair? Are we timely? Do we have good stewardship? These are all values that compete. And so for people to actually be able to make the right choices, organizations have to be really clear about what they value. And so, in this space, it's really exciting because the most important work that is happening right now is when interdisciplinary teams within hospitals, health systems come together. You have at the table org development, HR, clinical leadership. Yes, certainly patient safety, clinical quality, because they're often really looking at those metrics as a signal. But if you want to really change what's recognized, rewarded, tolerated, and punished, you got to go to everybody. So,
tell us the steps that a lot of hospitals still need to take in order to meet your ideal. Like, what are you seeing from different hospitals in terms of what type of work they need to do next?
Yeah, I think there are, like any notion that grabs attention and piques the imagination of people, you have organizations that have been at this for a long time. It made sense to them. The whole talk of this aligns with your values, it was easy to latch onto. And so that, you have early adopters. You have those that are kind of now coming because they are working from pretty strong national guidance and playbooks, responding to reports like the one we're talking about today, and saying, okay, we're not exactly sure maybe what that is, but we want to explore it. And then, as always, there are people that say, I don't think that's the right way to approach justice. Because when we're talking about what is recognized and rewarded, what's tolerated, many times what we have to recognize is we're not going to punish people for their errors. And we reset and we say, okay, what are we going to do if we're not going to punish you? Well, if you're working in a system that's way under-designed for the task at hand, and you happen to be the person whose human error set something horrible in motion, we may need to console you. We may need to own as an organization, we had a system there that was a bomb. It was just a matter of time until it went off. So, as organizations learn to say, what does this model mean? And then think and act and resource what needs to change in order to live those values, there's quite a lot of shifts that will go on. The other part of the model, there's many interesting facets of it. It's not particularly complex, but it isn't 100% aligned with American jurisprudence. Anybody that's a hockey player knows if you draw blood, your punishment is greater than if you didn't.
Yeah.
But the act of drawing blood is just kind of like maybe it hit the person in the wrong spot, right? So kind of peeling that off and saying, what do we give up if we're not going to hold you individually accountable for a particular outcome, but to really look beyond that? It means we have to be very sure of the quality of choice that demands disciplinary sanction. And sometimes that does occur. There are times when individuals who are employed in an organization will do something deliberately to impugn the reputation of the organization. They may choose to steal from a patient. Those are kind of outlier behaviors, but they do occur. This is not a blame-free system of workplace justice, but rather it says, let's look at the quality of the choice and the circumstances under which these individuals are acting in order to be able to get to the place of saying, what is the correct and from a system standpoint, what is the replicable response? Because we're mammals. Like other mammals, we know what's fair. We can immediately recognize when we don't feel like we have been treated well. So it is both, having a sound model of workplace justice, but also the ability to make it teachable, learnable, replicable.
We're talking to Barbara Olson. She's a nurse and chief clinical officer of the Just Culture Company. Today's KevinMD article is titled A Shop Teacher's Daughter on Transforming Patient Safety. Barbara, tell us some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the KevinMD audience.
Yeah, I thought about this a lot, Kevin, and I really want to say I think the most important thing, and it would have been true for me probably at any point in my career, is to really recognize that humans are fallible and that our ability to deliver the results that we want depend on not only knowing that, but doing something about it. And I would say that in healthcare, I think we under-guess, we under-demand, perhaps, metrics and measures that tell us how safe something is. Your airline can tell you the likelihood that you will be harmed on a flight. They can do it. Very rare event, but they can tell you, like, this is what we would project. They would never tell you. It's never going to happen. Let's just say it's so rare, you will likely not have this happen to you. You probably will never know anybody. They can also tell you how safe your luggage is. And that's not hard. Everybody has had lost luggage. Everybody knows somebody who's had lost luggage. But if I actually said to colleagues, how safe do you think somebody is if they're receiving an IV medication in an area where there's no barcoding? They would say, oh, I don't know. Oh, good question. So my take home here is, like, as we think about what we need to do to improve, it's kind of like step up, get picky. These principles are in use in other industries all day, every day, and we need to invite them into ours.
Barbara, thank you so much for sharing your insight and perspective, and thanks again for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.